going to concentrate on the scientific basis of the current regime of interrogation practices, mostly as propagated by the CIA. Let me start again with the words taken for the title of my talk. I had become a different person is the phrase used by one of the most famous victims of Soviet mind control, Cardinal Joseph Mindszenty, describing in his memoirs the results of 28 days during which he was captured by Hungarian police, interrogated for long hours, beaten, deprived of sleep, manipulated through lack of food, and personally humiliated. On February 3rd, 1949, following the 28 days, Mindszenty appeared before the world's cameras in a bizarre spectacle. And actually, I brought pictures from the newsreels that I'm unable to show, but if you're interested, I can show my PowerPoint after, during the question and answer. So these are very famous pictures in which Mindszenty looks a bit like a zombie, and he's being paraded before a court and basically condemned to prison. Grand action, mumbling his words, the former war hero and communist resistor confessed before Hungarian People's Court to treasonous crimes against church and state. And Mindszenty not only confessed to this string of improbable crimes, he gave information and names, today what might be called actionable intelligence. As I will outline below, Mindszenty's performance and the reaction it stimulated in the First World were the sparks that ignited a vast mind control research program in the United States that stretched from the early 1950s to the 1970s, exporting its techniques to the present. Basically, Americans in high intelligence circles wanted to know, they felt that they had to know, what the Soviets had that they didn't have: a brainwashing machine, a hypnotic spell, a mastermind drug such as LSD, or an esoteric secret that they had yet to discover. But before I discuss this mind control program, I want to make a brief comparison. Mindzenty's statement marks the pivotal moment of what the great Cold War brainwashing expert Louis Jolyon West labels the classic statement in the literature of brainwashing. These words, then, are an epitome of an epitome, the essence for some scientists of what scientific procedures of behavioral modification and behavioral engineering, when intensively and assiduously applied in interrogation, can do, or what the theorist and social critic Jacques Ellul, in a related context, called a state of permanent penetration. Permanent penetration, here I want to mention briefly a current association. Just the other day, I was listening to NPR, as many people often do, and I heard this report on the current legal case against Jose Padilla. Probably everyone here is familiar with his case to some degree. He's held as an enemy combatant for the past 4 years in the U.S. naval brig. Of course, Padilla has not written his memoirs and may never be competent to do so, but lawyers who met with him regularly have used language not dissimilar from Mindzenty's to describe him. He is like a piece of furniture, his lawyers were quoted as saying, and a high-ranking official told Nina Totenberg, the objective of the government always has been to render this person incapacitate this person. So you see a kind of parallel. 3 weeks after the Mindzenty sensation, on February 24, 1949, a CIA security memorandum speculated that the Cardinal was surely being controlled by some unknown force. And as we know from reading his memoirs, that wasn't the case, but they were sure that something unheralded had been used. In another quick-time analysis, Yale psychologist Irving Janis reported to the RAND Corporation that Mindzenty's case made necessary, quote, specialized technological studies on methods of placing an uncooperative person into a somnambulistic trance in which guilt, etc., can be implanted. Overall, the American response was quick and decisive. If the communists had cutting-edge interrogation weapons at their disposal, methods evidently more powerful and psychologically effective than brute physical torture, the task was to make American versions of such weapons for dealing with captive ideological enemies. In short order, CIA experts attempted Mindzenty-like effects on a group of Eastern European prisoners and refugees by means of drugs and trance induction, to no avail, although they did succeed in eliciting various states of confusion, and in one case, quote, amnesia for the interrogation was produced, unquote. So the dream was actually to interrogate someone and have them not remember that they had been interrogated. Forthwith, an interrogation team consisting of a psychiatrist, a lie detector expert, and a hypnotist went to work using combinations of the depressant sodium amytal with certain stimulants. Further tests on 4 suspected double agents in Tokyo in July 1950, and 3 months later on 25 North Korean prisoners of war, yielded results seen as positive. Meanwhile, the door to preemptive psychosurgery was opened. In a doctor's office in Washington, D.C., one unfortunate, his name obliterated in documents, was lobotomized against his will during an interrogation. These initial experiments with drugs, psychosurgery, and hypnosis were blunt and crude, obviously, rendered in grand guignol style. Researchers were looking for some dramatic strokes, a truth serum, or perfectly acting automatic technique to disable the will of the subject. But as research proceeded through the 1950s, it gradually became clear that these master stroke techniques were not really successful unless you wanted to end up with a vegetable or a corpse, which did occasionally happen. But that simpler, behaviorally oriented methods worked astoundingly well. A retrospective CIA catalog of its endeavors from 1950 to 1963 described the array of approaches, use of chemical and biological materials capable of producing human behavioral and physiological changes, as well as radiology, electroshock, various fields of psychology, psychiatry, sociology, and anthropology, graphology, harassment substances, and paramilitary devices and materials, unquote. Oddly enough, it was in the seemingly more mundane areas of psychology, psychiatry, sociology, and anthropology, the foundational fields of pre-war neo-behaviorism, that the greatest strides were made. And here I'll skip over the several key experiments from the post-war period, which you can easily find in landmark books like Alfred McCoy's Question of Torture and John Marks's books. So what I want to turn to is some more obscure research. So just to sum up this post-war period, when in 1963 the CIA summed up all it had discovered about interrogating insurgents and other enemies of state, it published what it called the Kubark Counterintelligence Interrogation Manual, to little aplomb because it was secret, but to great effect. This document brought together years of post-war research. It concluded, most importantly in the relevant chapter, the coercive counterintelligence interrogation of resistance sources, that psychologically informed interrogation based on behavioral engineering principles was most effective in both softening up such resistance sources and in getting the information they were resisting giving you. The manual included a step-by-step approach for inducing a state called debility, dependency, dread, through homeostatic derangement and the manipulation of the prisoner's sleep, temperature, clothing, body image, anxiety level, sense of dignity, and ultimately his sense of self. With all the manual stipulated sounding, for a moment of it existentialist, one can, quote, enhance within the subject his feeling of being cut off from the known and of being plunged into the strange. As has been made of the issue of torture, attention goes to the extreme examples, the enhanced interrogation techniques that are sometimes used with high-value suspects. But what interests me and what has received far less attention and far less censure are the average quotidian ho-hum interrogation methods like stress positions, sleep disturbances, disorientation, sensory deprivation, that are used in places such as Guantanamo, where as of last year, over 28,000 interrogations had been already performed. The routinization of such techniques, which are nothing if not systematic, which are legally grouped as merely inhuman, as in the acronym cruel, inhuman, and degrading, or CID, is what stands out for me from this history.